Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Miguel Jaller. I'm the instructor of record on this Friday seminar. Here we have with Anne-Marie Schaaf, who runs TTP and most of IDS. You probably have known her. And we also have our speaker today, Bernstein. So before we get into the business of today, and considering that this is our first seminar, I want to first welcome you. I think we're gonna have a really nice quarter with a lot of insights and really good speakers. And we also, you know that this is a class for you and there are some commitments. So Anne-Marie, why don't you remind us what you're gonna need to do?
Sure, thank you. For those of you that are registered students, there, excuse me, are 35 registered students for the class. This is TTP 281. You should all have access to the Canvas site, and that's where we'll communicate with the deliverables. You have to write 3 questions that you would ask the presenter. The question will open up, the assignment will open up at 1:30 on the day of the presentation, and it will remain open till 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Folks, listen to that, 35 students, 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Your homework is due. No, there was some questions about that last quarter, but let's make it clear. And you can pass the class by submitting 7 of the 8 homework assignments. If you miss more than 1, and you still want to pass the class, you can write a 750-word essay on a seminar that you missed. Most of our presenters allow us to record their seminars, and we post that recording on the Canvas site. There is, sometimes they do not allow us, but we will give you an announcement if they will not allow us to record. I believe all of the 8 presenters for this quarter have given us permission to record. So if you have any questions about the assignments and Canvas, please let Miguel or me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. And now, coming to the most important part of the seminar, we have Bernstein presenting today. Autumn was in your place 1 or 2 years ago. She's a graduate from our program, and we really miss her. Right now, she's the executive director of the Yolo County Transportation District, have many years of experience in urban planning and transportation, and basically have been leading the way in many efforts related to communities, equity, justice, and basically coming up with different plans and actions that have spearheaded efforts with local leaders, NPOs, and other agencies in the state and basically the region. She is the founding director of the Climate Plan, and I think she's gonna talk about that a little bit. And also on her consultant work, she has facilitated complex multi-stakeholder policy development processes that solve California's biggest challenges. Autumn, welcome. It's an honor to have you here. We are all yours.
Thanks, Miguel. That was such a nice introduction. And I especially love that you said I graduated from the program 1 or 2 years ago. Thank you. So hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm really excited to speak with you today. It's really an honor. When I was at TTP, which was, I know it seems like it was just yesterday, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I really enjoyed the Friday afternoon seminars for the diversity of speakers and just getting exposure to different ideas and concepts. And, some of the presentations were on topics that were really hard for me to grasp because they were beyond kind of what I was thinking about, and it opened my eyes to different ways of understanding transportation. And I hope to do the same for some of you. So I'm going to talk today about freeway tolling in California and what its implications are for climate change and equity. This is something that I've been working on and thinking about actually since I was at TTP. I did kind of a deep dive research project on high occupancy toll lanes because I wanted to just understand more about them. And it's kind of been a professional interest of mine ever since. And I've had the opportunity to work on several projects, first in the consulting sector, and now in my capacity with the Yolo County Transportation District, looking at a big project here in Yolo County. So I'm excited to share some of that with you. So going to the next slide. I know for these talks, we always are encouraged to see a little bit about our career path. So I wanted to share some about mine. I spent the first 15 years of my career really working in advocacy. So working for various nonprofit organizations that were working kind of at the intersection of land use, transportation, sustainability, justice here in California. And so I kind of put some of the logos up here of some of the different organizations I was either working with or volunteering or consulting with. And it really kind of runs the gamut from kind of active transportation, like you see with Walk Oakland, Bike Oakland, to trying to stop urban sprawl at the Sierra Nevada Alliance and Greenbelt Alliance, to advocating for sustainable transportation and also for solutions to our housing problems. So that was the first 15 years of my career. And then I kind of reached this inflection point when I was in my mid-30s, where I decided to take some time off, go back and pursue a master's degree, and also start a family. And those two things, I didn't really mean for them to coincide quite like they did, but my diploma arrived in the mail like a month after my son was born. So that was a really impactful period of my life. I learned a lot as a human being and also kind of as a professional, kind of looking at transportation from different perspectives that I gained while at ITS. And then at that point, I decided to take a shift into consulting and working with different agencies on a variety of different projects. So at the top left, CASA, the Committee to House the Bay Area. This was like an 18-month blue ribbon panel where we were looking at the housing crisis in the Bay Area and trying to bring together some of the warring factions around who's to blame. Is it tech and all the jobs they create? Is it the NIMBYs who won't let anything get built? Et cetera, trying to kind of work out some solutions. And that was a really exciting project that did actually lead to some state legislation that has been adopted in recent years around that. So that was a really fun project. I also, you might be wondering about this picture of this old Subaru. That's my car. It's parked at the El Cerrito Plaza BART station. I was actually at that time leading a parking management study for BART, trying to help them modernize and understand how their parking management system was impacting, whether or not people would walk or bike or take transit to the stations and ways to modernize it. And the irony is I took this picture because I actually got a parking ticket in this parking spot, because even though it says number 73 and I paid the money at the machine for space number 73, there's a tiny little sign behind it. This is no parking anytime. And it's also got a blue curb on one side. So I was mystified. And I love that photo because I think it's symbolic of the fact that I, as a consultant, was working on this. And even I got a parking ticket at BART because their system is so complicated. Anyway, at the top right is the Next Generation Transit Strategy, which is a project I worked on with SACOG here in the Sacramento region, really looking at the future of transit in the Sacramento region, which was a great project as well, to kind of engage with all the different transit agencies in Sacramento and different stakeholders to try to understand what's working, what's not, how do we improve things. And then finally, the slide at the bottom is from a project I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, is about this equity study for an express lanes project. And this was a public meeting that we held in San Mateo County, targeting low-income communities. And we had translators in Spanish, Cantonese, and Mandarin simultaneously translating this event and allowing for back and forth between the presenters and communities in real time. So that was a pretty fun thing that I got to do. Very complicated with logistics on Zoom. Speaking of being bad with Zoom logistics, you can only imagine how difficult this was. So that's a little flavor of like the path that I took to get here and where I am now. As Miguel mentioned, I'm now with the Yolo bus, the Yolo County Transportation District. If you're not familiar with us, we operate the Yolo bus, which serves Yolo County and surrounding areas. We operate fixed route bus service. We also have microtransit serving rural communities of nights landing and winters. I'm sorry about the margins being cut off. I'm not sure what happened there. And we also operate the Causeway Connection service in partnership with SAC-RT. That's the fully electric bus service that connects UC Davis with the UC Davis Medical Center in Sacramento. We're also the Transportation Authority and Congestion Management Agency for Yolo County, for those of you who know what that means. And we are also currently expanding to become a multimodal mobility provider. And I'm going to talk a little bit about one of those projects today, the Yolo 80 Managed Lanes project. We also recently received a grant to develop a plan for intercity bicycle trails in Yolo County, connecting like the cities of Davis and Woodland, Davis and Winters, West Sacramento. So really excited to be kind of bringing our agency into kind of more truly multimodal planning. So that's about me. So now I want to just give an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to first start with kind of just giving an overview of freeway tolling in California, what's happening and why, and then talk about the climate considerations and equity considerations around toll lanes, and then some strategies and case studies around how to mitigate impacts to climate and equity, and then close by talking about this project here in Yolo County, the Yolo 80 Managed Lanes project, and giving you an update. And also hopefully hearing a bit from you all about that. Okay, so what's a toll lane? Generally, a toll lane is a toll lane where, is a freeway lane where buses, vans, and carpools use the lane for free. People in a car often receive a two-person carpool will receive a discount, but other drivers, really solo occupant vehicles, can choose to pay to use capacity in the lane. The toll prices are dynamic to keep the lane free flowing. So as demand for the lane increases, the prices go up to make sure that the lane is always operating at ideally 45 miles an hour or above. And the prices are displayed on overhead signs, and there's usually electronic toll transponders that are used to actually collect the tolls. And just a quick sidebar on terminology, HOV refers to high occupancy vehicle or carpool lane. So carpool lanes are free for vehicles with multiple passengers, and solo drivers are prohibited from using those lanes when the HOV is in effect, which is generally during commute hours. HOT, high occupancy toll, this is what I was kind of describing on the last screen, where solo drivers pay a fee to use the lane, but it's free or discounted for carpools. And then an express lane is a lane where all drivers pay the toll, and there may be discounted tolls for carpools. So HOT and express lane, some people make distinctions between them. In other cases, you'll hear them used interchangeably, but they're really referring to this a lane where people have to pay money to use it. Some people pay more than others. And while I didn't put it on the slide, many of the toll lanes and HOV lanes in California, those who have clean air vehicles also often can go for free or receive discounts. So tolling has been growing quickly in California. In 1995, the 91 express lanes in Orange County were the first HOV lanes to be converted to express lanes in California. Since then, we've built over 200 roadway miles of toll lanes in the 3 largest metro areas. The first one in the Bay Area opened in 2010 on 680. And as of 2014, Caltrans was reporting 1,700 miles of toll lanes proposed or planned by both Caltrans and regional agencies in California. And I should say most of these lanes are entirely new lanes. In other words, they're new construction, or they are carpool lanes that are being converted to HOT. And this is part of a national trend. So the chart that you see on the left here illustrates the growth and the number of projects that are in toll lanes across the country. So 1,700 miles across the US, of which 40% of the national toll lane network is located in California. So this is really a national trend, but California is a huge part of it. So why is this happening? Why are so many toll lanes suddenly being built? Well, a big part of it is around just an increase in congestion that we see with what are so-called mega commutes or mega commuters. This really goes back to the connection between land use, housing, and transportation. As home prices have been increasing all throughout California, but nowhere faster than in the Bay Area. What we see is this rise in people doing what's called drive till you qualify. In other words, moving further and further away from their jobs. And we see this in Yolo County as well, as Davis has become increasingly expensive, right? Students, staff moving to Natomas, moving to Woodland, moving to Vacaville, because they can't afford to live in Davis, right? So as people are living further from their jobs, driving longer distances. This has a resulting increase in congestion in those core freeways that everyone is using to try to get to jobs. Obviously with COVID, a lot of assumptions and understandings about travel behavior are changing, but we do still see, congestion coming back pretty strongly, and so kind of expectation that will continue. In addition, there are some other factors in why toll lanes are becoming so popular. Other sources of revenue are declining. State and for many years, highway expansions and maintenance relied on state and federal gas taxes. Those are not indexed to inflation. The federal gas tax has not been updated since Ronald Reagan was president. So we see declining sources of revenue from the state and federal government, local governments trying to step in and fill the gap in various ways. And toll lanes create an attractive option for local revenue that can be reinvested in communities. We also see mandates and incentives to reduce vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions, VMT/GHG, particularly here in California, and I'll talk a bit more about those soon. And also this concept of the user pays principle, which we'll get into a little bit more, but really the idea that there's a perception that freeways are free because we haven't had to pay for them, but in fact, we are paying for them. We're just paying for them in kind of more convoluted ways historically. So by kind of I think in planning and transportation planning in 2022, there's an idea that the user pays principle has some value, asking people to pay up front for the goods that they're using or the services. So let's talk a little about climate change and the question that I think I want to try to provoke a conversation around is, are toll lanes better for the climate than other types of freeway lanes? I think this is a really important question because what we see is California regions, metropolitan planning organizations are increasingly relying on tolling to meet greenhouse gas targets that they have under California law. So this is an excerpt from Plan Bay Area, which is the MTC ABAG Regional Transportation Plan that was just adopted in 2021. And it says, one of the most impactful long-term solutions to congestion is road pricing. And it's a way to reflect the true cost of driving and motivate drivers to consider more sustainable options. So Plan Bay Area proposes implementing per mile tolling on select congested freeways where parallel transit options exist to curb traffic congestion and climate emissions through 2050 and beyond, while generating new revenues for reinvestment in sustainable alternatives to driving. So this is something that we actually see not just in the Bay Area. The SACOG, the Sacramento Metropolitan Transportation Plan, has similar language around tolling. It's true in San Diego. It's true in Southern California. This is really something that we're seeing, across California, is a sense that we need tolling in order to meet greenhouse gas targets because transportation continues to be the largest source of emissions here in California. And tolling is really seen as a way to get at that. But does the literature agree with this approach? So the next couple of slides, because everything is full circle, these actually come from the National Center for Sustainable Transportation, and credit to Jamie Volker and Amy Lee, who brought these to us and actually presented these slides to my board meeting earlier this week. So what this shows you is this notion of this vicious cycle, if you will, that we call induced travel or induced demand, where we see congestion and air quality problems on our freeways. We add roadway capacity, and that leads to faster speed, shorter times, less congestion, which then encourages more people to take advantage of those lanes and new driving. It brings us right back to where we were before with congestion and air quality problems. So this is this concept of induced travel. It essentially means that we see short and long-term behavioral changes. People will take a longer trip than maybe they would. Maybe you were going to go out to dinner in Davis. Instead, you decide to go out to dinner in Sacramento because traffic's not so bad anymore now that we've added that lane to the freeway. Maybe you take more frequent trips to Sacramento. You go out to dinner once a week instead of once a month. Maybe instead of taking the Capitol Corridor or the Route 42 to Sacramento, you decide to drive because it no longer feels as difficult when there's more capacity. Maybe you take a different route to get there. So those are some of the short-term behavioral changes that we see. There's also longer-term shifts so that households and businesses may relocate. So for example, maybe I was planning to build, some condos near the train station in downtown Sacramento, but maybe now instead I'm going to maybe think about looking out into Natomas because now I know it's easier for people to get back and forth between Natomas and their job at the university, for example. And that can also induce migration to the area, which is something we've really seen, in spades here in the SACOG region in recent years, particularly with COVID, with people from the Bay Area who no longer need to commute to their job 5 days a week, right? Maybe they only need to go to San Francisco 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So they move to Sacramento, and then drive to get back. So these are some of the changes that we see with induced travel that can lead to this phenomenon where we see that increasing supply of freeway space can actually lead to an increase in demand for that same freeway space. So this is a classic supply and demand curve, kind of macroeconomics. So on the y-axis, you have the cost, and in this case, the cost of driving includes travel time. And then on the x-axis is the volume of driving or vehicle miles traveled. So the left-hand demand curve, this is the original demand curve for an existing freeway, right? And so we know that with this demand curve, when there's a lot of traffic and it really slows down, there's fewer people that want to drive. If there's not so much traffic, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, then maybe more people would want to drive there because if it's easy, if it's quick, then a greater portion of people who are traveling are going to want to use that road. So, this perhaps was the vehicle miles traveled before you widen the highway. Then what happens is if you widen the highway, you change the supply curve, right? So instead of this first black line was the supply before, now you've switched to a different supply line because you do have more supply. So right away, we see that demand increases. So you go from this equilibrium point to this equilibrium point. That's that short-term behavioral change. And then over time, as we see kind of land use changes, whatnot, over the longer period, we end up over here with this this change demand and change supply. So where we ultimately end up in a similar position with regard to congestion, but it's just that there's more cars in a congested space on that roadway. So what we know what the literature tells us is that when you expand a highway, you get more vehicle miles traveled. And the relationship is about 1-to-1. So if you increase the capacity of the road by about 10%, you'll see a short-term increase in driving of 3 to 6%, and then up to 10% in the long run. So over the course of the long run, we really see that after about 10 years, it's like you didn't do the project because the capacity expansion has come back. We're going to talk about some nuances in this relationship, but this is the high-level takeaway. So then that leads to the question, do toll lanes induce less travel than other types of lanes, or is it basically the same as a general purpose lane? So I think there's a lot of complexity in this question, but what I want to share this analysis, this study that comes from a team at UC Berkeley that was just released in last year that looked at a number of different types of freeway expansions, including the Caldecott Tunnel, the addition of two lanes, two general purpose lanes in the off-peak direction, the express lanes, so toll lanes on 580 out in the Tri-Valley area, and then several projects in Southern California as well that are a variety of types of projects. And so what they found is that regardless of the type of project, they did see induced demand. The elasticities that you see here, I'll just kind of remind everyone, elasticities imply a correlation between two variables. So the closer the elasticity is to 1, the more there's a strong relationship in terms of the independent variable affecting the dependent variable. So in this case, the independent variable being the widening of the lane, and the dependent variable being the VMT that is induced. So what we see here, and these are all short-term effects. These are just measured 1 to 2. They looked at 1 to 2 years after the lane opened. They looked at Caltrans PEMS data, which is the loop detectors on the road, to see what had happened. So in Alameda and Contra Costa, this is the Caldecott Tunnel, where there's 2 new general purpose lanes going the off-peak direction. They saw, a relatively small implied elasticity, again, may have to do with the fact that those are off-peak direction, so not as much demand for travel in that way, but nonetheless, still an increase compared to what we were seeing before. And then in San Bernardino, where they had expanded to include a new general purpose lane and a carpool lane, we see this elasticity hovering around 3 or 0.3. And Alameda, the new toll lane, actually has one of the highest elasticities, despite being a toll lane and the fact that they are collecting tolls. Very high elasticity of 0.7 after just 1 to 2 years. And then lastly, in Orange County, a new HOV lane, carpool lane, with new connectors had the highest of the 4 at 0.84. So this indicates that there's all of these different types of lanes are in fact inducing demand and some pretty high levels of demand. Now, again, if you look at like the 580 in Alameda County, this is an unbelievably congested corridor. This is the main corridor for people that are coming from Stockton, Livermore, Tracy, into jobs in the Central Bay Area. So extremely high demand. And that I think there's a similar argument to be made around the 405. So some of this is related to, just how much demand exists for travel on these corridors, but nonetheless, we see that additional capacity is really kind of being gobbled up as soon as it is available. So how are policymakers looking at this shift? Well, we see in California some kind of promising signs that policymakers are really starting to recognize that that widening highways does have an impact. So just in July of last year, the state adopted the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPT. And this approach really embraces the concept of induced demand and recognizes that highway capacity expansion does not result in long-term congestion relief and actually makes things worse over the long run. And that expansions are costly. And when we expand the highway network, we're taking away funds from other transportation needs. So with regard to highway improvement projects, CAPT guiding principles say that projects should generally aim to reduce VMT and not induce significant VMT growth. When addressing congestion, consider alternatives to highway capacity expansion, such as providing multimodal options in the corridor, employing pricing strategies, and using technology to optimize operations. So how is this playing out in real life? This is an example from Sacramento County, an I-5 project VMT analysis. This is currently a draft analysis, I believe, but this is where they're looking at a widening of I-5 in Sacramento County and looking at some project alternatives. And so you see here, the first alternative is a no-build project. This is basically what is the current VMT. So the next couple alternatives, there's a carpool lane alternative, then a couple of different varieties of HOT or express lanes, and then a transit-only lane and a repurposing of the general purpose lane. Now, the National Center for Sustainable Transportation at UC Davis, their tool for estimating induced demand, really doesn't differentiate between these alternatives, according to this analysis, at least, that they really find that all of these lanes would functionally have a very similar impact. When you look at the travel demand model that's used in the SACOG region known as the SACSIM model, you see a bit more nuance, where this does find that, for example, a carpool lane would result in a 17% increase in VMT, whereas an express lane, a true tolled lane, would have only an 8% increase in VMT. And then, of course, a transit-only lane would actually reduce VMT, and repurposing a general purpose lane would also have VMT reductions. But those are the only ones where we actually see a net reduction in VMT. All the other lane alternatives would actually increase VMT. So, are toll lanes better for the climate than other forms of lanes? Well, the Anderson study from UC Berkeley finds that overall, the implied elasticities are similar across different types of lane expansions. So if you're asking that study, the answer is no, to oversimplify. But on the other hand, we know from congestion pricing literature that putting a price on driving does deter some travel. But so what seems to be happening is that in California, the effect of adding new highway capacity is greater than the effect of congestion pricing. In other words, the demand is so great for using that highway space that despite the fact that there's a price on it, it's still the excess capacity just gets sucked up right away. So, I would be curious if we can engage in a little conversation. I would love to hear any thoughts that students may have about why you think this is happening. Why are we swamping? Why are we, even when we put a price on lanes, it doesn't seem to matter, doesn't seem to slow down demand. I'm curious if anyone out there has any thoughts on that. Yeah, I see a hand from Katie.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these long distance commutes, it's the only option. You either have to pay or you don't commute. There is no, Amtrak that runs, or SMART only runs part way up the north. And if you do try to get somewhere, you're more than likely going to have to take about 3 times as long to get there by public transit, and gonna have to switch modes at least once.
Yeah, great point. I mean, if you don't really have high quality, reliable transit that's competitive with driving, then no amount of financial incentive is going to get you to use an option that's not really viable, right? That's a great point. Did I see another hand? Yeah, Jahir?
I will say, like, whenever I've gone down the road, like back to like where I live with my parents, or gone to visit my girlfriend in like San Francisco, I think that the toll lanes, like, they're not that expensive. It's only like $1.50 or $2, which is it's like less than a Starbucks coffee. So it's not really like that. It doesn't really deter me that much from just hopping on there for a bit, and then once I'm like there, it's just $2, not too much.
Yeah, great point. So maybe the tolls are not high enough, frankly, to discourage to change behavior. Yeah. I see another hand from Ray.
Following up on just what Jahir said, I was going to say a lot of people in California, especially in Bay Area, they don't mind the pricing, and they even enjoy it because they can drive faster and they can totally afford it, or they can afford fancier cars that are exempt from paying those fees, and then they even drive more because they have this faster lane that they can use.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If you're making a lot of money, it's kind of nothing to you, huh? Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I was going to build on Katie's comment, because what I feel is that there's no competitive or reliable alternative to actually get down of the car, and it's still not costly enough for people to get off the car. So it might as well just take it and be there on time for jobs and for work and study, because if you don't have a reliable option, then you basically either spend too much time waiting for the bus or whatever, and or the rail doesn't go everywhere, so you would still have to use bus as well. So it's not very competitive.
Yeah, those are all great insights and great observations. And anyone else want to jump in here before we move on? All right. Well, thanks, you guys. I appreciate you all engaging on this with me. So, all right, let's move and talk about equity considerations. So the question I want to address here is that our toll lanes, quote unquote, Lexus lanes, disproportionately benefit the wealthy at the expense of low-income travelers. So, there are a number of equity concerns around toll lanes. One is that it's a regressive fee. Many low-income people are unbanked or underbanked, so may not have the ability to have an electronic toll transponder that's linked to a bank account, et cetera. Similarly, technological barriers, having a smartphone or other ways to kind of manage an account, these can be kind of make it difficult for people to even get into the system to be able to use the toll lanes. And I think that the fourth one is that, more benefits accrue to higher income drivers. This is the kind of the Lexus lane idea. And then the fifth, that environmental justice impacts on surrounding communities from building a new lane. And I want to start with the last one first, which is around just the construction of new lanes. And I think it's very clear when you look at the pattern of where freeways are concentrated in California, that race played a really pivotal role in deciding which neighborhoods got freeways and which didn't. The top photo is from San Francisco. It's from a public meeting in San Francisco when the city was proposing back in the 1950s and 60s, a very aggressive freeway plan that would have put freeways through many neighborhoods of the city. And what we saw is that white neighborhoods were successful in stopping freeways from going. So if you think about the kind of northern and western neighborhoods of San Francisco, the freeways just stopped there. But the south and eastern portions of San Francisco is where you see all of the freeways. And those tended to be the highest concentrations of African Americans and other people of color. Similarly, if you look at Oakland, neighborhoods around Oakland are, particularly West Oakland and downtown Oakland, are absolutely crisscrossed by freeways, some of which have never even really, the 980 freeway, which is shown on the left-hand side of this photo of Oakland, never actually served very many travelers. And in fact, there's an active proposal to try to dismantle 980 in Oakland to reconnect that downtown Oakland to West Oakland. And in all cases, in many of these cases, when these freeways were built, entire communities were displaced. The use of eminent domain to forcibly take people from their homes, and take that real estate, move them elsewhere. And then the communities that are left behind, really deal with having the kind of the disconnection, of having huge infrastructure bisecting their neighborhood, air quality, noise impacts, et cetera. And so actually there's a proposal, Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, who represents a South LA neighborhood, Bell Gardens, is proposing a law to ban freeway expansions in underserved communities. So communities that meet disadvantaged communities definitions under state law, that it would actually make it illegal to ban freeway extensions in those areas, in recognition of the historical injustice and burdens that those communities have suffered that continues today in terms of disproportional, asthma and health impacts, as well as, all of the other associated negative externalities that come with having freeway lanes. So that's it's very clear from the literature, that yes, when you widen highways in low-income neighborhoods, there are environmental justice impacts. When it comes to some of the other equity considerations, I think the picture is more nuanced. So this slide summarizes findings of a literature review that I worked on in 2020, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that project. But some of the findings, I'm not going to go through everything in detail on this slide, but some of the things that I want to highlight. The second point, congestion pricing schemes are generally more equitable than the status quo of unpriced roads. And this seems counterintuitive to a lot of folks until you think about the fact that, even though freeways aren't actually free and that we are paying for them, historically, gasoline taxes were a big part of paying for highways, but nowadays they are mostly paid for through sales taxes. Sales taxes that are enacted at the local level to pay for projects. And sales taxes, we know, are one of the most regressive forms of public finance, because low-income people tend to use a higher portion of their income on goods, whereas wealthier people tend to spend a higher portion of their income on services, and services are not subject to sales taxes. So when we look at congestion pricing, because of the user pays principle, it actually puts more of the direct burden on people who are using the lanes, which gives you a choice, as opposed to if you're just going to the store to buy diapers or food, you don't have a choice but to pay that tax. Even if you don't own a car, even if you never drive on the freeway, you're still paying for it with your sales taxes. Express lanes are slightly less regressive than other forms of transportation finance. Again, that kind of ties back to what I was just saying with regard to sales taxes. But that revenue redistribution is key to equitable outcomes. So in other words, if you are collecting tolls, how are those tolls being used? And if they are redistributed in a way that is prioritizing equity, it can result in equitable outcomes. It is also true, just to highlight one of these points on the right, that the direct benefits of express lanes tend to accrue to higher income groups more than others. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But that acceptability after implementation is generally widespread and all groups make some use of the guaranteed reliable travel times. Even students in the TTP program, like Jahir was saying, that, obviously you guys don't have a lot of money, but, you're using the lanes too, right? So is everybody else. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that might be the case. So who uses toll lanes? Well, there is not a ton of research out there. I think more is in the works and I'd like to see more of it. But the studies that we have, particularly looking at before, after, before a toll lane, a carpool lane is converted to a toll lane, finds that high income groups do tend to use the toll lanes more often, but that about 25% of low-income commuters are frequent toll lane users. And this comes from a study of the State Route 91 hot lanes in California. And the same is true when you look at other studies like this that have been done elsewhere in the United States, that you do see that low-income commuters do actually use the toll lanes. They don't use them as often, but they do use them regularly. And I think we could have a conversation about why that is the case. But one of the things that I know from some of the work I've done is people talk about the fact that, when they use the toll lanes, it's because, if they're late to work, they might lose their job. If a relatively affluent person is late to work, maybe the chances are lower that they're actually going to lose their job. So the consequences may be higher for people who are more vulnerable, who are more economically vulnerable. If you need to pick up your kid from childcare, if you're a working mom and you have to pick up your kid from childcare, a lot of childcare providers charge exorbitant late fees. So to you, it's actually going to cost you less money to pay that toll and make sure you pick your kid up on time, rather than sit in traffic and then pay, late fees for picking up your kid late from childcare. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the stories that I've heard in talking with low-income people about toll lanes. So can we make toll lanes more climate friendly and more equitable? I want to talk about some potential kind of paths forward, mitigation solution sets, if you will. And the first is to talk about is using toll revenue to support the diverse needs of low-income travelers, and emphasis on the diverse needs part, because not all low-income travelers are transit dependent. Not all low-income travelers drive, et cetera. And we'll talk a little bit more about what does that look like. And I want to do so by talking about this project that I worked on that I've alluded to a few times last year. This is the San Mateo 101 Express Lanes Equity Study. This was a project to develop a pilot equity program that invests toll revenue in underserved communities in San Mateo County. It's tied to the 101 Express Lanes, which are opening actually next month. Between South San Francisco and the Santa Clara County line. So that entire stretch of 101, they've been under construction for a few years. And the Joint Powers Authority that is building those lanes wanted to make sure out the gate that they were putting some of that toll revenue into benefits for low-income communities. So they committed $1 million in the first year of lane operations, and then at least $600,000 annually going forward. They wanted the program to be flexible and evolve over time in response to changing community needs, particularly because we were doing all of this during COVID. So this was about a year-long project. I was the project manager for it while I was at Arup, and we partnered with a firm called Estelano Advisors on this project. And so what we did is we went through this kind of long process where we first started with developing a vision and desired outcomes in partnership with community and reaching out to targeted communities to understand their travel challenges, their concerns about the lanes, and looked at a bunch of existing local studies and did our literature review. With that, we came up with 10 preliminary alternatives that we then screened through a variety of different filters, and then came up with 4 top alternatives that we that we then took back to the community and also did a technical evaluation with qualitative and quantitative metrics to then develop this equity program that has now been adopted. What we heard from communities is that, that their needs were diverse and that unreliable public transportation was a challenge, high cost of public transportation in that area. Caltrain is like one of the fastest, most convenient services, but it's very expensive. And also that traffic was a real issue in terms of limiting people's ability to access opportunity. They wanted to see toll subsidies or other programs to help low-income drivers use the lanes. They wanted more frequent, reliable public transportation. They were also concerned about, bicycle pedestrian safety, and they wanted to see transit be more affordable, particularly Caltrain. So that was what we heard in the first phase. And then when we went back and, and gave them 4 equity program alternatives, we heard that both a benefit to help people use the express lanes and a transit benefit were the 2 most popular, and that really support was really divided equally among them, again, because not everybody takes transit, not everybody drives. So there was really an emphasis on the need for flexibility and choice, and also for multilingual, culturally sensitive education about how to use the lanes and how to access the program. So we did also a demographic and a travel behavior analysis focused on those areas of concentrated poverty and other demographics in the study area. So you can see some of them here in their list, but these are the areas that were the target for our analysis, although the final equity program is going to be open to anyone in San Mateo County who meets the income qualification. So the final equity program gives people a choice of either a Clipper card with an annual value of $100, and that's an annual recurring benefit, or a fast track toll tag transponder preloaded with a value of $100. And that's, again, to get people over the technical barrier, because it's actually more expensive to get a toll transponder if you don't have a bank account. So this helps unbanked people, circumvent that and give them a toll transponder, which then, because of the way these lanes are designed, if they have a 3-person carpool, they'll be able to actually use the lanes for free once they have that transponder, or use it as a discount, excuse me, with a 2-person toll. And the program is also going to promote enrollment in some regional discount programs like Clipper Start, and for youth and for seniors. And the program's open to residents of San Mateo County that are 18 and older and eligible to receive at least 1 benefit provided from the Core Services Agency Network, which is social service providers in San Mateo County, and or have the income below 60% of the area median income, which is about $76,000 this year. And one of the things I think that's really cool about this program is it's actually administered through what's called Samaritan House, which is a nonprofit social service provider that works directly with communities. So rather than the transportation agency trying to administer this program, who really doesn't have the relationships or skills or understanding of these communities, having these social service providers actually administer the program. So Samaritan House is running the program overall, and then working with a variety of different local providers who, again, are place-based on the ground, who work with these communities, who provide them support with housing, employment, food, et cetera, to really kind of meet those communities where they are and ensure that they know about the benefits that are available to them. I see I've got a couple of questions. I'm happy to pause and take questions. Miguel, or would you prefer that I just kind of keep running through at this point?
Take a few minutes to answer some of the questions. There are 2. There is only 1 that we're commenting in the chat, and there are 4 questions in the Q&A.
It's really hard. It's really hard to hear you. Are you talking, Miguel?
Oh, sorry.
There
You can take some minutes to answer. There is 1 comment in the chat and a few questions in the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I see that Marcus had a hand up. Marcus, did you want to ask your question? Oh, okay. Maybe that was an accidental. Okay, I haven't actually had chance to read everything that's in the.
Okay, so we have a question.
Yeah.
Marta Armas suggests of charging the toll fees based on the weight of the vehicle, and give the example that trucks are heavier and are destroying roadways and are also contributors to emissions.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't believe that trucks are eligible to use toll lanes currently. And I don't know the history of why that is, other than I think that, I think that the priority is to reserve those lanes for passenger vehicles. But you raise a good point about the fact that that trucks do contribute disproportionately, or maybe proportionally, depending how big they are, to the breakdown of freeways and to pavement rehabilitation needs, et cetera. Yeah, that's a good point.
The other question is about multiple individuals in a vehicle when they are using a high occupancy toll lane. Will the consolidation of trips eliminate any other negative consequences of those additional trips?
Can you repeat the question?
So what is the impact of having multiple users traveling in the same vehicle when using the HOT? Will that just provide benefits, or still some of the conclusions that were discussed before about the total effect of HOTs?
No, it's a great point. I mean, I think it depends on assumptions about whether or not those people would be taking separate vehicles if they were not in a vehicle together, right? So, with carpool lanes, for example, we can assume, part of the reason we could assume that like a carpool or bus only lane has a net reduction in VMT is because you're making that roadway space only available to carpools or buses. So you're sort of essentially taking roadway space away from single occupant vehicles and giving it to those who decide to share a ride. So absolutely, I mean, I think that does provide a benefit, but as far as the exactly how that is kind of assumed or estimated in some of these studies, we'd have to look at the details of each individual study for that.
Thanks. We have another question from Stally. Will the transit agency be a better centralized authority to administer the equity programs?
Yeah, I think what we see is that there's absolutely a role for the transportation agency to administer programs. However, for example, in the Bay Area, there is this Clipper Start program, which I referenced on the slide. I can go back to it. This is the Clipper Start program is a low-income means-based discount, and it's for anyone using a Clipper card anywhere in the Bay Area. A number of different Bay Area transit agencies have agreed to participate in it, and it provides actually tremendous value. But what they've seen is that MTC, who administers the Clipper, and the local transit agents have really struggled to actually get people enrolled. And it's because, frankly, it's just not, they don't have those connections. They don't work with those communities on a regular basis. I think they're trying to change some of that. But what we've seen is that the enrollment in those programs has really lagged behind what you would expect, given what a tremendous benefit it is. And it has to do with, how accessible is it? How do you find out about it? How do you sign up? And so by partnering with social service agencies that, are the kind of places where low-income folks are familiar with, they're trusted. They know that they can get help there. They've gotten help with things in the past. There's a trust issue. There's a trust advantage as well as just a familiarity. If they're there signing up for housing services or getting help finding a job, the providers that they're working with can say, oh, by the way, did you know that this is something that's available to you? So there's evidence that shows that that's kind of a more effective approach than just asking transit providers to figure out how to find those communities and connect with them.
Thanks. We have another question. Could you discuss about why was the decision of expanding the 80 versus just converting lanes?
That is a good segue, because I'm going to be getting to that point in the presentation in just a few minutes. So why don't I'll keep moving for now if there's not any other questions on the subject matter we just covered, and we can keep going at that point. Perfect. And I can answer that question when we get there.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So the second strategy I want to talk about is adding transit to express lanes. So actually, let me back up. So this is a picture of the 110 freeway in Los Angeles. You can see downtown Los Angeles in the background. And this is the Metro Silver Line. It's now called the J Line, which operates on express lanes that run in the median. And they actually have these very cool stations that are actually in the middle of the freeway. So you can see there's an elevator. So people who want to get on this bus, they actually take an elevator up from the street below and then wait on these platforms. And what this does is it means the buses are able to quickly take people on and off the bus and keep going, so they don't have to get on the congested off ramp, go onto surface streets, pick people up, and then get back onto the freeway. So it's a very neat system. So what Metro has done is they provide direct transit subsidies using toll revenues. So since the lanes opened on the 10 and 110 freeways, I want to say in around 2010, and initially they were using the toll revenues to pay back some of the kind of construction and various fees associated. But once they had done that, they've been using toll revenue to fund transit. So they've spent about $55 million in toll revenues over the course of the last 6 years or so to fund both the Metro J line, which they increased the frequency and span of service, as well as Foothill Transit, Torrance Transit, Gardena Transit. These are all transit operators that use those lanes and receive revenue from the toll. And then they also have a transit rewards program, which is designed to encourage transit use. So basically what happens is every time you ride a qualifying transit trip, you receive a toll credit to use the express lanes. And so, you know, this is meant to reward people for taking transit and also to recognize that sometimes you need to take a trip that transit's not going to be able to serve. And so you're actually this is kind of giving you, particularly for low income people, the ability to use the toll lanes, you know, when you need them, but not every day. A third strategy is investing in community needs. So this is a picture from Oakland. This is if everyone's familiar with the original Scraper Bike team, this is the Scraper Bike movement was kind of born in East Oakland. And what's this picture on the right is showing what's called a Scraper Bikeway. So this is a project, I think, on 90th Street in East Oakland, where they're creating a bike lane, but it's visually a reminder of the Scraper bikes. So this is just a really cool example, I think, of like a community infrastructure need that really reflects kind of the culture and the spirit of the community as well as the need. So this is another place where we can look to LA Metro for a great example. So they have what they call their net toll revenue reinvestment program. So as part of the legislation the ordinance that they adopted when they created the 10 express lanes, they said that all net toll revenues will be used for HOV facilities, transportation corridor improvements, and transit service improvements. So there's 3 buckets. 40% of the funds go to transit. You know, these are improvements like station enhancements, purchasing new vehicles, providing fare subsidies. This kind of the middle category, 40% is for like complete streets projects, bike infrastructure, last mile connectivity. And then 20% is, you know, for the roadway to just kind of continue to maintain and update the roadway with latest technology to, to make the most out of that roadway capacity. So final section, and hopefully I'm not getting too close to being over time, because I know we want to have plenty of time for questions. I want to talk a little bit about the project here closer to home. I'm calling it here Causeway 2.0, but it's the Yolo 80 Managed Lanes project. And the question that this project poses is, what would an equitable, climate-friendly Yolo 80 causeway look like? So this is a project that is a partnership between YCTD and Caltrans, and then a variety of local partners, including UC Davis and SACOG. And the project area is, sorry, this is a little bit off, but the project area, basically, it's from the county line to the county line. So it's starting actually just over the county line in Solano County, and then the entire 80 pathway all through Davis and across the causeway, and then some improvements on 50 and 80, basically just across the county line into Sacramento County. The project elements that are under development are restriping to add an additional managed lane. So just to clarify, this is not about kind of widening the causeway. There wouldn't be any physical changes to the causeway itself. This would just be restriping and basically getting rid of the inside margin, excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Getting rid of that, restriping to take advantage of the road space to have an additional lane that is in the center, both directions. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements on the existing bike path. Earlier iterations of the project that did not receive funding, we're talking about a fully separated bike path I think that's something that there's still a lot of interest in, like a brand new bridge across the causeway, but it's not part of this project as it's currently scoped. Intelligent transportation system elements to just, be able to like detect incidents on the freeway and clear them more quickly. New connector ramp at 8050 Interchange in West Sacramento. So this would basically be a fast lane to fast lane connection. So rather than if you wanted to get on 80, if you're going eastbound on 50, if you were in the managed lane, you could just go straight onto the managed, theoretical new managed lane on 80, rather than having to go all the way to the right, get off at the interchange, and then merge back over. And then faster and more frequent bus service. So the current status of this project is that it's been through some amount of design and public engagement. Caltrans is preparing to release an EIR later this year that will have a variety of alternatives, including a carpool lane, HOT, express lane, bus only lane, et cetera. And then that will, YCTD and Caltrans will be looking to get public input on the different alternatives, and then selecting a preferred alternative and then moving forward. We did receive an $86 million federal infra grant that partially funds construction, but additional funding is going to need to be identified in order to fully fund and implement the project. So it is very much in development currently, and there's going to be, I think, a lot of opportunity to engage and help shape this project in the year ahead. So anyone who's interested, I would love to have you stay engaged as we go through this process. But in summary, highway expansions are problematic from the perspective of climate inequity. Putting a price on freeway lanes has some potential benefits, but those projects have to be carefully designed to minimize harm and maximize benefits, particularly for low-income communities. And for more information, there is my email address, and would welcome the opportunity to hear from you guys. So I will stop there. And Miguel, do you want me to keep my slideshow up, or should I stop sharing?
You can keep it. I haven't seen a question that refers to a specific slide, but they may come up.
Okay.
So Katie, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I have a more general question. Given the increase in long distance commuters that span multiple jurisdictions, who takes the lead on projects and improvements? Is it Caltrans, or do we need special districts to step in? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say it's an evolving one, and it looks different in different places. So here in Caltrans District 3, Caltrans is really takes the lead on kind of planning, design, environmental review, and construction of projects. In the Bay Area, Caltrans District 4, it's a little different. Caltrans tends to be more of a partner where the local agency is taking more of a lead on design and environmental review. So it just kind of varies a bit organically. But I'd say in all cases it's a partnership, and it's not just local transportation districts like ours obviously have a really important role to play, but so do local jurisdictions. And we're very much in conversation with the cities of Davis and West Sacramento and Yolo County, all of whom touch the freeway and have a real important stake, particularly when it comes to the air quality issues, as well as cut through traffic that is impacted by by people who are trying to get around congestion on 80 by cutting through local roads. So I'd say I wish I had a better answer for you, other than it seems to be a bit organic, put it that way. And I don't know.
You.
Yeah.
Any other question from the students? If you're attending, you can post your questions in the Q&A. Sally?
Hi, yeah. I was wondering, there's also in the Bay Area, there's all these tolls on all the bridges, and they've been increasing over the time, but they don't necessarily respond to any sort of demand or anything like that. Has there ever been any consideration of that aspect? Because even then, even with the increased tolls as to what they are now, it's still cheaper than riding transit, unfortunately, in a lot of situations. So has there been ways of talk of coordinating that kind of congestion pricing on the bridges?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a couple different things that are going on there. One is that the Bay Area, the bridge tolls in the Bay Area for some of the bridges, because of course it has to be complicated and it can't be the same for all of them. The voters actually have to pass a measure to increase the bridge tolls. So there's been a couple, Regional Measure 1 and Regional Measure 2, that were passed in the, I want to say early 2000s and then early 2010s, that were basically, there had to be a majority vote of all of the voters of the Bay Area to increase those bridge tolls. And then it actually came with an expenditure plan for how they would be used. So one of the things that was funded by the original Regional Measure 1 was the Trans-Bay bus service. That a lot of that goes a lot of from the East Bay into destinations in San Francisco and on the peninsula. A lot of that has been funded by those bridge tolls. So that's part of it. And then some of the other bridges, the Golden Gate Bridge and also the Bay Bridge, there have been some experiments in variable tolling. It's not real-time dynamic tolling, but it is higher at certain times of day when there's higher demand. So like on the Bay Bridge, at least before COVID, if you were driving during the peak hours in the morning, you were paying like $2 more than you would be paying if you were driving in the middle of the day, for example. But I don't know the extent to which there's been thought about trying to do dynamic tolling. I think it probably, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm guessing based on the history that it probably would actually have to go back to the voters in order to do something like that.
Yair?
I had a question about different types of transport. Because we do have the train, we do have like the Caltrain, but I looked at like a long time ago when I first moved to Davis, I was trying to look at different forms of transport instead of driving all the time. And I saw that the Caltrain, even though it probably moves unobstructed, so like you would on the freeway, it still takes around 2 to 3 hours to go to like SF from here or go to San Jose. So I was kind of interested in if you guys were considering maybe like a high-speed railway system, sort of like how they have in China, where they have like this giant grid of high-speed rails, that something like that from here to San Jose or here to SF would be maybe like half an hour or 45 minutes. A lot shorter than the system you have now.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple things. I mean, yeah, the Capital Corridor train does run on tracks that are like down, basically like on the bay in certain places, and there's like actual real concerns about the resiliency of that system long term with climate change and sea level rise. And it, because of and also where they go through the Sassoon Marsh. It's like really basically at sea level going there through the Delta. So I think that there's, increasing the speeds on that corridor is tricky because it's like sensitive habitat, and also there's questions about the long-term viability of the system. But I know that they are working on improvements to increase the frequency of the trains and make speed improvements where they can. And then there is also the California High-Speed Rail Authority, is looking at this longer term, much more ambitious vision for something like you're talking about, that's true high-speed rail, where we're talking about, speeds upwards of 150, 200 miles an hour. That project is currently, they're developing the first phase in the San Joaquin Valley. And that, I mean, I think so, and then I think that's like phase 1A. And then I think phase 1 overall is meant to try to connect Los Angeles to San Francisco, and then separate phases, going up through the San Joaquin Valley and over kind of in the Pacheco Pass area, and then up through San Jose, where it would basically hit the Caltrain line and then go up to San Francisco. And currently Caltrain is under electrification, in part to facilitate, potential future high-speed rail. So, and then as far as extending high-speed rail from San Francisco up to Sacramento, I think that's kind of like phase 2 or phase 3, very, very much down the road in the future. I think that project is really visionary. I think it's going to really struggle because it's just so incredibly expensive, because the rail, in order to have those speeds, the track has to be incredibly straight, incredibly level. And that is very hard to do in a landscape like California with our topography, you know, without having it being very expensive and kind of having big kind of visual and environmental impacts. So I think this is why they've started in the Central Valley where it's already flat and it's a little bit more straightforward. I think it's going to be a real challenge getting it through like the coast ranges, for example. But it's exciting that California really is leading the way, at least in terms of thinking about projects like that and conceptualizing them and trying to move it forward. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. And, you know, you're early in your career, so you might be at a place where you actually get to see that, see that project actually built and ride it someday. I hope I'm still alive when it's finally operational.
Can I just like say something about? I remember I had to look into different parts of like my hometown when I was doing a project for a class, and I saw that they had a high-speed railway plan within the board, and like like on my hometown website. But then when I went to look for it for the actual like project, it wasn't there anymore. So I was like, they probably scrapped it because of the expenses.
Where is this? Where's your hometown?
San Jose. Well, it's I live like in the outer areas of the city, not really in the main place.
Yeah, we'll see. I think I grew up in that area too, and it would be cool if it happens. We'll see.
We have a question in the Q&A coming back to the tolls and the I-80 project. Why not just provide a lane for transit and then assume the causeway as a bridge and then just toll the bridge?
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. I mean, I personally think that we are headed in the direction of more and more freeway tolling over the coming decades. I think that politically, what we've seen in California is that so far, pretty much every toll lane has either been new construction or it's been conversion of a carpool lane. We have not yet seen conversion of general purpose lanes to toll lanes on a wide scale. And I think that has to do with just kind of, it's like a political third rail. The idea of kind of taking away something that's free and making it tolled is something that I think is very, very challenging for decision makers to consider. That said, I do think that's probably the overall direction that we're headed in the future. But it's not something that seems to be like on the table currently. And I wish there was a better answer other than just politics. But it's true that politics are a big part of this. So, yeah.
Last year in our IC 193 at our capstone project, we partnered with Caltrans, and our undergrads work on this I-80 project and came up with additional suggestions.
I would love to see some of those.
Yeah, okay, we can.
Yeah.
I can send you the links. Wei Jin?
Yes, I have a general question. In your organization, what's the collaboration or relationship between transportation planners and engineering? So as far as I realize, there has been some discussions on what role or responsibilities planners play and engineering play. I think in practice, it's more related to the technical feasibility of the project and the funding availabilities. I think it has been like increasing discussions on that. So I'm curious about how that happens in your organization. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, I should say my organization, YCTD, is very small. We're about 14 people. And then we contract out our transit operations to a private company, Transdev, who has about 100 people here on site. So there's 14 of us on one side of the wall. There's about 100 people at any given, they're not all there at the same time, but driving buses, bus mechanics, et cetera. So we, because we do not do design of projects at YCTD, we do not employ engineers. Our staff are primarily planners and transit operations experts. So the engineering, we really rely on our partners at Caltrans, who have the kind of robust engineering staff and capabilities, you know, everything from looking at the the roadway itself and looking at the right of way and how to utilize the right of way, drainage, electrical, there's just a lot of different components to it. And, and I would say the planning and engineering sides in general, I joked when I was in Miguel's class that like, for the, all of the planners, we didn't do so well on the final exam, and all the engineer types did very well on the on the final exam. Even in graduate school, you're right, you see some of those kind of natural tendencies or inclinations. But I think that the reality is that the engineers and the planners, we need each other, and it's important for the planners who tend to be more engaged with the community and kind of more visionary in terms of wanting to kind of pie in the sky ideas, to really understand what the constraints are from an engineering perspective. Otherwise, our plans are not going to be successful. But consequently, engineering solutions, conversely, engineering solutions. I think induced travel is a great example of like an engineering solution that works well in the long term. In the short term, when you take it and then you apply human behavior and how humans make decisions, it ends up that the engineering solution kind of is not really a lasting solution, because it's not considering some of the ways in which human beings respond to engineering, right? So it's a balancing act. And I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Vanessa?
Hi. So my question is, I was wondering if there are any YCTD efforts working in alignment with housing authorities to increase affordable housing at or near major employment or university hubs. And so the reason why I bring that up is because, I think definitely freeway expansion, I don't think would be the main solution, and toll lanes could work, but then there's issues with equity. So from my observation, especially seeing the physical evidence that in cities, I'm thinking that there needs to be more efforts, and I'm sure there already are some going on in many places, as we hear in the news, on providing affordable housing. But I think now it's even more important because so we can see, if we go to downtown Sacramento right now, it kind of looks like a ghost town, because either employees are working from home or businesses have shut down because no one is there to procure their services. So, and people may not be living there because it's too expensive, right? So I was wondering if YCTD is working to increase affordable housing availability in these major city centers, so that the burden and congestion can be reduced on the freeway and all other major city arteries.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm realizing we're almost out of time, so I'll try to keep it quick. I know it can be kind of long-winded. The short answer is no. It's kind of not within our purview as an agency. It's not to work on affordable housing or housing in general. That said, we are very much looking at how do we make sure our service is serving places where there's high density housing or where there's plans for high density housing. So we're actually looking to implement our Route 42. We're making some changes to our Route 42, which is our inner city loop that connects all the communities in Yolo County with downtown Sacramento. We're looking to increase the service frequencies from 1 hour to 30 minutes, and also to make some changes to where that routing goes, particularly to serve, like in Davis, for example, along 5th Street, where we've seen a lot of new density and more planned density of transit-oriented housing along 5th Street in Davis. And to speed up that service to connect people. And then I think, interestingly, one of our board members in Winters was earlier this week was telling me that they were applying for funds for an affordable housing project in Winters, but because there's no longer fixed route transit service in Winters, we serve that community with micro transit, which is actually a better solution for a smaller community. These are like the on-demand shuttles that pick people up and take them where they need to go. but that doesn't qualify as high quality transit for these applications for affordable housing funding. So that was one of the ways in which they were unsuccessful in getting an affordable housing funding application. So I think it's, I would really like for us to work more with our partner agencies to help support housing development and make sure we're serving new housing and supporting it in whatever way we can, not just with transit service, but also active transportation improvements.
Thank you. I think we are out of time. Autumn, thank you so much. Looking forward to chatting with you with some of the research we're doing related to transit and affordable housing for that matter. Thanks everyone for your questions, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you. Thanks, Miguel.